roads in Alaska at night don't just get dark. They devour light, leaving this Klondike wayfarer bus, a solitary firefly trapped in an endless inkwell. And every groan of metal seemed to whisper stories I actively tried to suppress. My breath fogged the windshield of bus number 7. A second layer of mist against the Alaskan chilled had already swallowed everything beyond the reach of the headlamps, and I wondered idly if this was how Marcus, my old station captain, had felt before the inferno swallowed him too. The memory, sharp and hot, was a constant unwelcome passenger. My name is Rowan MacLeod, ex-firefighter, current insomniac. The vast, indifferent emptiness of Alaska was supposed to be a balm, a quiet penance for the flames I couldn't outrun, for the men I couldn't save. Instead, the silence here had its own teeth, its own peculiar kind of screaming. The pay for driving these graveyard routes for a barely known outfit like Klondike Wayfarer was surprisingly decent, enough to keep the wolves from my door, both literal and metaphorical. For now, the dispatcher's office was a drafty, prefab hut smelling of stale coffee and desperation. No smiling faces, no HR department, just a laminated schedule, a set of keys thrust into my hand by a stoic elderly woman who barely looked up from her crossword, and a battered leather-bound notebook. Previous driver left this, she'd grunted, said it might be helpful. He quit. Zudden. The bus itself was old, a lumbering beast that smelled of diesel, damp wool, and countless unseen journeys. It was clean though, almost unnervingly so. As I settled into the driver's seat, the worn leather of the notebook felt cool beneath my fingers. Inside, the handwriting was erratic, spidery, with certain phrases circled in faded red ink. 3 phrases specifically under the underlined heading: rules, non-negotiable, for your sanity if nothing else. My first passenger was already waiting at the unlit stop, just outside town, a silhouette against the bruised twilight. Corbin Vance. He introduced himself with an easy smile and a firm handshake, his eyes keenly observant, taking in the bus, me, the notebook I just placed on the dash. He claimed to be a writer, researching local Alaskan folklore for a new book. Heard this Klondike route has its share of character, he'd said, a little too brightly. Another figure emerged from the gloom. Alara Hayes, younger, with a serious face and a backpack overflowing with what looked like research materials. She nodded curtly, an air of preoccupied academic focus about her, and settled into a seat near the front, immediately engrossed in a thick, annotated volume. Further back, already occupying a corner seat as if he'd materialized there, sat an older man, weathered and wiry, his face a road map of Alaskan winters. His name, according to the manifesto, was Ezra Gristhorne. He just stared out the window, unmoving. As I pulled away from the stop, the bus groaning in protest, I flipped open the old notebook again. The first rule stared back at me. Don't open the door for knocks after midnight. Nothing's there, just a local superstition, I told myself. This wasn't a wildfire. This was just a road. But beneath the dashboard, barely visible in the dim cabin light, I noticed a small tarnished metal plate, etched with a strange, spiraling symbol I didn't recognize. A faint, almost imperceptible thrum seemed to emanate from it. The first few hours unfolded in a monotonous rhythm of winding roads, the dark teeth of the spruce forest pressing in on either side, and the occasional, spectral dance of the aurora borealis painting the vast, indifferent sky. Corbin Vance, true to his writerly persona, occasionally tried to draw me into conversation, asking about any unusual experiences on the route. I kept my answers short, non-committal. Alara Hayes remained engrossed in her books, occasionally making notes with a frown of concentration. Gristhorne hadn't moved a muscle, a silent, brooding fixture in the back. It was well past midnight, the bus deep, in a stretch of uninhabited wilderness between two distant pinpoint settlements when it happened. A series of sharp, distinct knocks on the main door. 3 quick raps. Tap, tap, tap. There was no scheduled stop. No lights, no buildings, nothing but the infinite, snow-dusted emptiness outside. My hand instinctively moved towards the door lever. Wouldn't do that if I were you, driver. Gristhorne's voice, gravelly and low, startled me. It was the first time he'd spoken. I looked in the rearview mirror. Elara had looked up, a flicker of unease in her eyes. Corbin was leaning forward, an almost predatory glint of interest on his face. Don't open the door for knocks after midnight. Nothing's there. The rule from the notebook. The knocking came again, louder this time, more insistent, almost desperate. A primal urge, firefighter's instinct, and an outbreak from. Someone could be out there, injured, freezing. Just the wind playing tricks, son, Grizz rasped. Or something a whole lot less friendly than the wind happens on this stretch. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the lever. The knocks came a third time, frantic now, followed by a sound like fingernails scraping across the glass. A cold dread, sharp and unwelcome, prickled my skin. With a conscious effort, I pulled my hand back, gripped the wheel tighter, and kept driving. The sounds abruptly ceased. An unnerving, absolute silence descended, broken only by the engine's hum. It felt colder in the bus now, significantly colder. A few minutes later, Elara Hayes cleared her throat. "Mr. MacLeod," she began, her voice carefully neutral. "Legend in some of the Athabascan communities speaks of travelers between worlds who test the boundaries on nights like these. They say acknowledging them, even through a closed door, can invite attention." She looked pointedly at Corbin, who was scribbling furiously in his own notebook, a small, satisfied smile playing on his lips. As I glanced at the side mirror to check the road, just for a second, I thought I saw it. A tall, impossibly thin shadow figure, standing at the edge of the spruce line where the knocking had occurred. It wasn't human. It was too elongated, its limbs too spidery. Then it was gone, swallowed by the darkness or a trick of the tired eye. But the faint scent of wood smoke, the very smell that haunted my nightmares of the wildfire, drifted through the cabin, sharp and acrid. The incident with the knocking left a palpable tension in the air. Corbin Vance seemed almost energized by it, his questions becoming more pointed, his gaze more intense. Elara Hayes retreated further into her research, though I caught her glancing nervously towards the windows more than once. Gristhorne remained impassive, a granite statue in the dim light. My own unease grew, the words from the old notebook feeling less like superstition and more like hard-won, bitter experience. The bus hummed along, the only sounds the engine, the tires on the frozen road, and the occasional rustle of Corbin's notes. After dropping off a silent miner at a desolate turnoff marked only by a leaning wooden sign, I checked the large rearview mirror above the windshield, a routine habit. It reflected an empty bus, completely, utterly empty. The seats behind me, where Elara and Grizz and even Corbin should have been, were vacant, stark, in the faint glow of the interior lights. My heart leaped into my throat. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. They couldn't have all gotten off without me noticing. If the mirrors reflect no passengers, don't check the seats. Rule number 2. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to visually confirm, to dispel this terrifying illusion. The journalist in Corbin would have demanded proof. The academic in Elara would have sought a rational explanation. The part of me that was still a firefighter, responsible for lives, felt an urgent, nauseating need to account for my passengers. Gritstone's voice, low and calm, cut through my rising panic, though he hadn't appeared to move or even open his eyes. Mirrors lie on this road, driver, especially when the stillness starts to breathe. Trust what you know, not what you think you see. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, My breath hitched. The stillness. Was that what the old driver had called it? I forced myself to keep my eyes on the road ahead. The swirling patterns of snow in the headlights. The urge to look back, to check the seats, was almost overwhelming. Several agonizing minutes passed, then compelled. I risked another quick glance at the mirror. Elara Hayes was there, her head bent over a book, a pencil tucked behind her ear. Grizz Thorne was slumped in his usual corner, seemingly asleep. Corbin Vance was still a few rows back, watching me with an unreadable expression. It was as if nothing had happened, but Elara, without looking up, said softly, "The Inupiaq elders speak of soul catchers that can steal reflections, or show you the emptiness they wish to fill. It's best not to engage." Later, when the bus was briefly stopped at a lonely automated fueling station, I found the previous driver's notebook again. Tucked into a back pocket, I found a newer, more frantic entry scrawled on a loose piece of paper. "Mirrors are windows. They show what it wants you to see. Vance. He keeps asking questions, pushing. He knows more than he lets on. Listen to the old man. The woman. She might understand the symbols." Then a chilling sentence. "This road took Marcus. Vance was with him. I'm sure of it. Marcus, my station captain." How? Another wave of cold dread washed over me. What had Corbin Vance been doing with Marcus, my Marcus, on this godforsaken road? The revelation about Marcus and Corbin Vance hit me like a physical blow. My hands tightened on the wheel, my mind reeling. Vance, with his easy smiles and academic curiosity, had been with Marcus on this route. The implications were sickening. I found myself studying him in the rearview mirror, searching for any sign, any flicker of guilt or knowledge in his eyes. He met my gaze evenly, offering a bland, writerly smile. The further we drove into the Alaskan interior, the more the landscape seemed to press in, vast and ancient and utterly indifferent to human concerns. The sky, when clear, was a riot of stars, cold and distant. The aurora borealis, which Corbin had been eagerly anticipating, began to flare, painting the heavens in ghostly ribbons of green and violet. It was beautiful, but there was an unsettling quality to its light tonight, a restless, almost sentient energy. Elara Hayes, increasingly agitated, was now frequently consulting a complex astronomical chart and what looked like a magnetometer. "There's significant geomagnetic activity tonight, Mr. MacLeod," she said, her voice tight. "More than predicted. Some old texts correlate these intense auroral displays with temporal instability. Thin places, they called them. It was during one such intense auroral display, the light outside pulsing like a giant cosmic heartbeat, that the third rule came calling. We were on a long, straight stretch of road, miles from any known turnoff or settlement. Suddenly, with a jarring hiss of pneumatics, the main passenger door and the rear emergency exit of the bus swung wide open. A blast of frigid air, carrying the scent of ozone and something else, something ancient and metallic, like old blood on frozen earth, whipped through the cabin. When the bus doors open on their own, don't stop. It's not for you. My foot hovered over the brake. Every instinct screamed to stop, to secure the doors, to ensure no one fell out. But the rule, and Grizz Thorne's earlier pronouncements, echoed in my mind. "Keep driving, MacLeod," Elara shouted from behind me, her voice strained. "Whatever you do, don't stop." Corbin Vance, however, was on his feet, a handheld recording device in his hand, his face illuminated by the eerie green glow from outside, an expression of rapt, almost feverish excitement on his features. "Incredible!" he breathed, moving towards the open doorway. "The energy readings are off the charts. This is it. This has to be it. Vance, get back!" I yelled, fighting to keep bus steady. From outside, carried on the whistling wind, came a sound. Not a voice exactly, but A chorus of whispers, faint and multi-layered, seeming to beckon, to promise something. Knowledge? Escape? Oblivion? It was impossible to tell. Grizz Thorn had his eyes squeezed shut, his hands gripping the seat in front of him, muttering what sounded like a prayer or an incantation in a language I didn't recognize. With a surge of adrenaline, I stomped on the accelerator. The old bus roared in protest, lurching forward. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few hundred yards, the doors, with another violent hiss, slammed shut of their own accord, sealing us back into our rattling metal coffin. The whispering ceased. The intense pressure in the air diminished slightly. Corbin Vance looked disappointed, almost angry. "You shouldn't have done that, MacLeod," he said, his voice losing its friendly veneer, replaced by a cold, hard edge. We were on the verge of a breakthrough. Later, when things had quieted, Elara leaned forward, her face pale, but her eyes bright with a mixture of fear and intellectual curiosity. That whispering. Some of the oldest stories from the Tainit and Haida people speak of passage songs from the Sai, the spirit world. They say these songs can open doorways between realms, but only for those who are invited, or those foolish enough to listen too closely. She looked pointedly at Corbin, or those who try to force the doors open. Grizz Thorn, who I thought had been asleep, opened one eye. Some doors, once opened, he rumbled, his voice like stones grinding together. Ain't so easy to close again. And what comes through ain't always looking to go back. He then fixed his gaze on Corbin Vance. And some folks who chase ghosts end up becoming them. The old man's words hung in the frigid air, a chilling prophecy. The aurora borealis, moments before a breathtaking spectacle, now writhed across the sky with a manic, unnatural intensity. The vibrant greens and violets pulsed like exposed nerves, casting the desolate Alaskan landscape in flickering, spectral hues. Elara Hayes, hunched over her instruments, confirmed Rowan's disquieting premonition. "The geomagnetic storm is peaking," she announced, her voice tight with a mixture of scientific awe and dawning terror. "The field is unstable, highly unstable." The old texts, they warned about times like these, when the fabric of things thins out. Almost immediately, the bus began to protest. Lights flickered and died, plunging them into near-total darkness, save for the ghostly glow of the aurora and the weak emergency lamps. The engine coughed, sputtered, and threatened to stall, its usual rhythmic growl replaced by a sick, lurching cough. The radio, long silent, crackled to life, spewing not static, but a cacophony of distorted voices. News reports from decades past, snatches of old songs, and then, chillingly, a strained, terrified voice Rowan recognized with a jolt that went straight to his heart. Marcus, his captain. It's everywhere. God, the fire. It's everywhere. Followed by a prolonged, agonizing scream that was abruptly cut off. Rowan's breath hitched. The air in the bus grew impossibly cold. The metallic tang of old blood, the scent of burning pine from his nightmares, now thick and cloying. The stillness Grizz Thorn rasped from the back, his voice a low growl. It's awake, and it's hungry. The road ahead seemed to warp and twist. The familiar spruce trees lining the highway dissolved into grotesque, shifting shapes, then vanished entirely, replaced by an endless, featureless plain bathed in the aurora's sick light. Rowan fought the wheel, but the bus seemed to have a mind of its own, or rather, no mind at all. Simply drifting into the unsettling landscape. Time itself felt distorted. The dashboard clock first spun wildly, then froze. A low, guttural knocking erupted from all sides of the bus. The windows, the roof, the floor beneath their feet. A relentless, deafening barrage. The rear-view mirror showed not an empty bus, nor their terrified reflections, but an impossible, swirling vortex of colors, like looking into the heart of a fractured nebula. The doors, front and back, flew open with a violent hydraulic scream. The whispering chorus from outside now, an overwhelming, multi-layered torrent of sound. Pleas, threats, promises, the voices of the dead and the never-born, all vying foreign. Attention. Bonsoir. Passengers, the few silent miners and bundled-up locals who had been on board began to scream, or worse, to stare blankly ahead, their eyes wide and unseeing, some reaching out towards the open doorways as if beckoned by invisible callers. It was Corbin Vance who broke the horrified paralysis. His face, illuminated by the pulsing aurora, was a mask of ecstatic, almost religious fervor. He was no longer just observing, he seemed to be reveling in the chaos. Yes, this is it. The convergence. The veil is torn. He fumbled with a complex-looking device from his bag, a metallic cylinder covered in strange antennae and glowing dials. The previous driver was too timid. He fought it, but you, MacLeod, with your trauma, your receptivity, you're the perfect conduit. Vance, you maniac. What are you doing? Alara screamed, trying to pull a dazed miner back from an open door. Documenting truth, Corbin yelled back, his voice cracking with excitement. He aimed the device towards the swirling chaos outside, capturing the essence of the liminal, my masterpiece. He then deliberately, shockingly, shoved one of the catatonic miners, a young man Rowan had shared a brief friendly nod with earlier, towards the open rear door. The man tumbled out into the writhing, light-filled void with a barely audible cry, vanishing instantly. He was an acceptable loss for a clear signal. Corbin cackled, adjusting a dial on his device. The resonances are purer now. Rowan saw red. The image of the falling miner, the memory of Marcus's screams, Corbin's callous disregard for life. It all coalesced into a burning, righteous fury that momentarily eclipsed his own PTSD. This wasn't a wildfire he couldn't fight. This was a monster in human form. He slammed on the brakes, the bus skidding wildly on the non-existent road, ignoring the cacophony of the stillness, leaving Grizz and Alara to try and secure the terrified passengers. Rowan lunged from his seat towards Corbin Vance. The confined space of the bus became a battleground, the spectral light of the aurora illuminating their desperate struggle, while outside the Stygian passage yawned, eager to claim them all. The fight with Corbin Vance was brutal and desperate. He was surprisingly strong, fueled by a manic energy, his eyes blazing with the fervor of a zealot. Rowan drawing on reserves he didn't know he possessed, a grim echo of his firefighting days, slammed Vance against the shuddering side of the bus. The rider's strange device clattered to the floor, its lights flickering erratically. The whispers outside seemed to intensify, as if enraged by the interruption of their show. Alara, having managed to pull another dazed passenger back from the brink, screamed at Rowan. The notebook, the symbols. There's something about a focal point. A disruption. Rowan's mind, amidst the chaos, flashed back to the spiraling symbol etched on the metal plate beneath the dashboard, and Grizzthorn, his face a mask of grim determination, was now chanting in a low, rhythmic drone in what Alara later identified as an ancient Koyukon dialect, his hands pressed against one of the bus windows that seemed to ripple like water. Thinking fast, Rowan wrestled Corbin away from the driver's seat, kicking the rider's device further into the shadows. He threw himself back behind the wheel. The road ahead was still a swirling miasma of impossible colors and distorted landscapes. Focal point. Disruption. The words from the previous driver's notebook. Follow the true north, not the trickster light. The old star knows the way when the world turns inside out. Suddenly made a desperate kind of sense. Ignoring the GPS, which was displaying nonsense, Rowan strained his eyes, searching the chaotic sky. The aurora was a distraction, a lie. But there, faint and steady, almost lost in the lurid glow, was Polaris, the North Star. He wrenched the wheel, aiming the nose of the shuddering bus towards that single, unwavering point of light. The bus roared, or perhaps it was the stillness itself roaring in protest. The whispers reached a fever pitch, pounding against his skull. Images of the wildfire, of Marcus' burning face, flashed before his eyes, more vivid, more terrifying than ever. But this time, there was something else too. A cold, hard core of defiance. He would not break. Not again. Slowly, agonizingly, as he held his course true to the North Star, the landscape outside began to coalesce. The swirling colors started to recede, the featureless plain resolving back into the familiar, if menacing, shapes of spruce trees and snow-covered tundra. The cacophony of whispers lessened. The knocking faded. The doors, with a final shudder, slammed shut on their own. When Rowan dared to look in the rearview mirror, it showed only the pale, terrified faces of Elara, Grizz, and the few remaining passengers. Corbin Vance lay slumped in a heap, either unconscious or too shocked to move, his face streaked with blood and an expression of utter disbelief. They had broken through, or perhaps the shifting stillness had simply let them go. The rest of the journey to the next small settlement, a mining outpost called Terminus Creek, was made in a heavy, traumatized silence. The aurora still danced, but it was a calmer, more natural display. The road was just a road, but no one on that bus would ever see it. Or the Alaskan night. The same way again. When they finally pulled into the dim lights of Terminus Creek, Grizz Thorne was the first to speak. "Some paths," he said, his voice ragged, "are best left unwalked, and some stillness is best left undisturbed." He looked directly at Rowan. "You drove well, son. Kept your head when the sky was falling." Elara, though visibly shaken, was already documenting everything she could remember, her scientific curiosity battling her terror. The interaction between the intense geomagnetic activity and something else, something localized. It created a temporary rupture in perceived reality, she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. Vance, he wasn't just observing, he was trying to widen it. Corbin Vance was handed over to the bewildered local constable, along with a fragmented, barely coherent account of assault and endangerment. His strange device was confiscated. Whether any real justice would come of it, in this remote corner of the world, remained to be seen. Weeks turned into months. Rowan MacLeod quit Klondike Wayfarer the day after the Terminus Creek incident. As the sparse official report vaguely termed it, he couldn't face another night on those roads. Couldn't unhear the whispers. Couldn't unsee the void that had yawned open before them. He tried to settle in a small coastal town. The rhythmic crash of waves, a welcome change from the oppressive silence of the interior. But the Alaskan darkness had left its mark, etched not just in his memory, but in his very soul. The nightmares of the wildfire were now interwoven with images of swirling auroras, bottomless voids, and the ecstatic mad grin of Corbin Vance. Sleep offered little respite. Grizz Thorne had vanished back into the woodwork of whatever remote cabin or trapline he called home, leaving Rowan with only that gruff, parting acknowledgement. Elara Hayes, true to her academic nature, eventually published a tentative, heavily theorized paper in an obscure journal on anomalous spatiotemporal perception in geomagnetically active boreal regions based on anecdotal accounts. It was met with skepticism and polite dismissal from the wider scientific community. There was no replicable data, only fragmented testimonies from traumatized individuals. The news about Corbin Vance was equally unsatisfying. He was eventually released due to lack of concrete evidence of anything beyond a public disturbance. His recording device, when examined, contained only hours of corrupted files and deafening static. But a few months later, a small news item surfaced online. An independent documentary filmmaker, previously known for sensationalist paranormal investigations, had gone missing while attempting a solo expedition into a notoriously remote and geologically unstable region of the Siberian taiga, an area rumored by locals to have similar thin places. The article included a grainy photo. It was unmistakably Corbin Vance, a wild, obsessive gleam in his eyes. He had found a new Stygian passage to explore. Rowan tried to find peace. He volunteered at a local animal shelter, the quiet companionship of the rescued creatures a small comfort. And yet, the scars remained. Sometimes, on nights when the aurora was visible, even that far south, a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer on the horizon, he would feel a familiar cold dread, a sense of the world tilting on its axis. The rhythmic hum of the refrigerator could, in certain moments, sound like the distant rumble of bus number 7. A sudden, sharp knock on his door after midnight would send his heart leaping into his throat, even if it was just the wind. One evening, sorting through a box of Marcus's old belongings his widow had finally given him, Rowan found a small, tarnished silver locket. Inside, instead of a photograph, was a tiny, intricately folded piece of paper. On it, in Marcus's familiar handwriting, was a single spiraling symbol, identical to the one on the metal plate beneath the dashboard of the Klondike Wayfarer bus. Below it, one cryptic sentence: "The path is a circle. The fire always returns. Look to the stillness, Rowan." The Stygian passage hadn't just been a random horror. Somehow Marcus had known. About the road, about the stillness, perhaps even about his own protégé's eventual terrible journey. The path was a circle. Was this a warning, a premonition, or an invitation to understand something far deeper, far more ancient than he could comprehend? Rowan looked out at the dark Alaskan night beyond his window. The aurora was faintly visible, a ghostly ribbon in the sky. The old bus, the whispers, the void, they were still out there. And a cold, unsettling thought began to form. Perhaps some passages, once traversed, could never truly be left behind. Perhaps the shifting stillness wasn't just a place, but a state of being, a resonance that, once tuned into, would echo within you forever. And the fire always returns.